Hi, welcome to my channel. Let me take a moment to introduce myself. I'm Drew, and I am a first Q in Goju Karate with the Shobukan Martial Arts Academy, which is out of Ponte Vedra, Florida. Our Hanbu's out of Okinawa. And I'm a Navy JAG, and I'm currently stationed abroad in Japan. Briefly, kind of how I got to this initial spot. I joined the dojo when I PCS'd my first active duty assignment in the Navy down to Jacksonville, Florida. After I'd been there for about a year or so, I affiliated with the dojo. And I had always wanted to study Goju Karate. I was that kid who grew up with Power Rangers and the Karate Kid and all of those sorts of movies, really in that boom of the 1990s with all the martial arts media geared towards kids. And Goju in particular had always kind of spoken to me. I thought that mentality of a defensive style really appealed to me. I'm not a hyper-aggressive person. To me, the idea of defense always just made a lot more sense, and especially in kind of the modern world. So Goju had always been kind of the draw, it had always been the goal, and I affiliated with the dojo, and in that system, in particular in that dojo, a white belt is a 10th Q, and then the belt ranks generally go white, yellow, orange, purple, blue, blue with the black stripe, green, green with the black stripe, brown, brown with a black stripe, and then finally black belt, the Shodan, the first black belt rank. So currently like I said, I'm a first Q, so I am a brown belt with a black striper. But that progression wasn't the easiest thing in the world. It never is. No journey worth anything is ever that easy. I struggled a little bit with really kind of learning the basics, the basic stances and transitions and things. Being, an older adult, being, I hate to say it, but middle age, things don't necessarily kinesthetically get learned as easily as they once did, if I was a teenager still. But the art was something that I was loving as I learned it. And I did make rank relatively quick. I was I'll just kind of put it this way. About 2-3 months before I left, a little bit longer than that, in about March of 2025, I left in July, but in March of 2025, I found out that I was going to be coming to Japan as my next duty assignment. And I knew that I wanted to get as far as I could, as fast as I could, because I knew that I was probably going to end up in a position where I needed to self-study, where I needed to be able to do this on my own, at least to a large degree. So I was a purple belt. I had gotten quite confident with where I was. I felt like I was doing good with learning the purple belt curriculum that we had. And I went from going to class two or 3 days a week for an hour for each of those classes, or however long the adult classes were. But I was bare minimum, maybe a little bit more than bare minimum, but I was going, I was involved. And then I found out about my PCS, and at that point, the game changed. At that point, I was at the dojo every day that they were open. So that's Monday through Thursday, and then Saturdays. And they would have private lessons a couple days a week. I would be in there while their private lessons were going on, back in the back corner of the dojo. And sometimes when I was back there training, working on some of my kata or whatever drill I was working on, one of the senseis, I would either step away from the private class they were teaching for 2 minutes and give me a little bit of guidance, or the other sensei would come out of the office and work with me briefly. But I was there every day that they were open for at least 3 to 4 hours a day. frequently as much as 5 hours a day. So the training volume obviously just really kicked in. I made blue belt a little over a month or so before I was set to PCS. Um, but that wasn't enough for me, and I kept training and I kept training and I kept training. And as I mentioned, there's a in-between rank kind of between our blue belts and our green belts, and again between our green belts and our brown belts, and then our brown belts and our black belts. There's this sort of striped rank, and that rank is typically not a rank that is has an associated kata. It's typically a rank that has more of a drill or something like that's associated with it. So for like the blue belt with the black stripe, it's typically what they refer to as advanced hand techniques. So those techniques, those open hand techniques, are things that are largely derived out of Tensho, but instead of learning that kata at that point, it's let's learn how to use those techniques as basic blocks in a movement drill. And it also serves then, when it's paired in a partner drill, with being a timing and a arm conditioning drill. So so that's a for instance there as to what that would look like. But in about that month between when I made blue belt and when I left for Japan, I left for Japan July 2nd, 2025. And on July 1st was a Saturday. It was my last day in the dojo. And I went in knowing that I was going to be most likely having a testing day. It had been kind of insinuated that they were going to give me one last test before I left. And despite the fact that the test from the blue belt ranks to the green belt ranks is that kata is saifa. And then the next one between green and brown is Sayunshin. I tested saifa and I tested Sayunshin that day, and they promoted me to green belt. They had told me before that, look, Hambu's not, does not like it if we're skipping people too many belts, especially if in a situation where you're making rank that fast. But they went ahead and promoted me to green belt. And at that point, I got the blessing from Sensei Richard, basically saying, you're at a place where you can do this on your own, where you can train on your own and learn on your own. That was an amazing vote of confidence, very exciting for me. And at that point, I PCSed to Japan. It took me a little bit of time to kind of begin to get into a battle rhythm a little bit. I did a little bit of training outside of a picnic pavilion on the water on board the naval base in the summer, probably around August or so. And then I eventually got moved into my rental house where I'm filming this video from. And training really fell off. I was really trying to focus on my job. I'm a Navy prosecutor doing special victim crimes, so it's a heavy caseload mentally and just timeline wise. So training kind of took a back seat for a while, and then I learned that I had a case that was going to be entering into a plea bargain back in Florida that needed to. I was assigned to the case, so the other prosecutor and I were going to fly to Jacksonville, Florida to do this plea. And I took advantage of it, scheduled for a week of leave on the back end, scheduled private lessons with senseis for both the week that I was there for, privates for the second week when I was on leave, but I was at the dojo training in the normal class schedule that week that I was there for the hearing. And knowing that was coming up, I really got in gear and really started training hard. I found a place on base, big wide open gym, and I began to train hard. I got back to training basically 4 to 6 days a week. Sundays are always an off day, but pretty much every day after that, I was in the gym training. And, that's one of the struggles that I've had, and I'll talk more about struggles in a subsequent video. But the getting in there and training and learning and doing the best that I can. And then I went back for that hearing, and after 2 weeks of training in the dojo, I was again flying out on a Sunday. So I spent through Saturday because they have a long session on Saturday that is like an open gym time kind of thing. And at the end of that open training session, I was promoted to my second kyu, to my brown belt. And I returned back to Japan, and really the jump between the brown belt and the brown belt with black stripe is a kumite drill, a two-person kumite drill. And up until this point, I had only seen this drill a handful of times. It wasn't something that I felt really super comfortable with. And also, whenever I had promoted to brown belt, they had given me a lot of feedback on, in particular, Saifa and Sayuchin, where there's a handful of things that I wasn't doing completely wrong, but they definitely needed some loving, if you know what I mean, just a little bit of fine-tuning. So over that next 2 months or so, I was again in the gym all the time, training, and I was back in Virginia a little over a month or so later for a course for the Navy, and then I took a week of leave, went back to Florida, and did another week of private lessons. And at the end of that week of private lessons, I was promoted to my brown belt with black stripes, so my first kyu rank. So that is how I've gotten here. And the purpose of this channel is to really track my journey to Shodan and then beyond. So what comes next after I make Shodan? Because the black belt isn't the end, it's the beginning. So right now, the focus is on what's the target directly in front of my nose. Well, the target directly in front of my nose is to get to black belt. But that's not where the journey stops. And that's why the channel won't stop when I get there. But until then, this channel is to service as a sort of a tracking of this evolution of what I am learning and what I am doing. And my thoughts and things as I go forward. And I will be having many more videos to discuss these topics. But for now, I just wanted to welcome you and give you the quick ish 1,000 foot overview. Thank you. And Nintai, persevere and endure. Thank you.